Andre Heinz, please come up on stage. Andre, it's so good to be here. I would like to shake your hand and hug you and whatever, because you are such a great individual. And Andre, you've been following Sweden Food Tech for a bunch of years, and of course we've been following you for a bunch of years as well. You'd have to tell a bit more about yourself, but the fact that you're one of the earliest venture capitalists in green tech. You're one of the first investors in Beyond Meat, which is this, of course, plant-based meat. And of course, you're following now the developments in the world from the investor, but also thinker perspective. So, Andre, what are you seeing out there?
Oh, boy. So I think, like everyone else in the room, I'm sensing and seeing a greater focus and a greater level of engagement with the broad spectrum of what food really is about. So on the, you might say, user or consumer end, it's one of the few cases where we can actually refer to consumers accurately. It's around things like health, as Joshua also, I think, referenced or alluded to. It also touches on awareness and understanding, all the way upstream to how it's grown or sourced and its impacts. And so understanding the complexity of those two different kinds of footprints and everything in between is becoming more and more populated with people who are keen to find solutions and answers and better understanding. I see that, generally speaking, in my work. I've got relatively narrow lenses in many respects when it comes to applying our own efforts. That's both from venture capital. As you mentioned, we've done that obvious ventures, Beyond Meat, Miyoko's Creamery, which is a vegan creamery. We've done, boy, there's actually a long list, actually. Urban Remedy, Good Eggs, which is sort of a digitally enabled and empowered connection to local farmers for near-term picking and delivery in the Bay Area. Taika for functional coffee, which sounds a bit redundant, but it's actually adaptogen-powered coffee, to more industrial IQ-related investments, such as using LiDAR for accurate scanning of fish fry in upscale agriculture. Or in a personal investment, we did some really fun stuff in Tunisia using urban food waste for soldier fly larvae farming for aquaculture and for agricultural inputs, to philanthropy. So another hat I wear, maybe it's a beret, I don't know, is a community philanthropy in Pittsburgh, which is where I'm from. And in Pittsburgh, like many American cities, we brag a lot about everything that goes right, but when you look behind the curtain, you see a huge, a quilt and a lot of holes. And those holes in the context of food are both food deserts, where people in our community are not getting access to fresh food, let alone organic or sustainable food. And I know that in Sweden, it's often viewed in reverse, with the wonderful company Livs trying to address the food desert problem up in sort of a rapidly thinning rural Sweden. We also have problems when it comes to the disconnect that I think Carolyn will talk to later today around how we source food. So we're also working there with urban agriculture, as well as upstream sustainable agriculture practices through our foundation work. I can go into more details if you want.
You have ample chance of doing that in the panel that comes up in a while. And no, so but do you feel hope?
Oh, about what? Yeah, around food. I mean, more than ever before, in that I think beyond just people being more interested and conversant and doing more homework, I think we're seeing some, finally, some really big breakthroughs. I would say it's the step forward from the first steps in the sort of the post-industrial agricultural stage were taken arguably by the first organic farmers, the kind of wave of post-hippie activism, now into a more dynamic space. I was saying we have to, I think, as Josh correctly points out, continually push the envelope with different language and different models to understand how enjoyment, customer satisfaction, societal desires can be met through different experiences, not just the ones we inherit. And likewise, if we take Beyond, although there's a fair question of where does things like Beyond and Doof meet in contrast, the fact is, with actually paying attention to things like food texture, taste, you can actually improve a product so much so that you can blast through the perception barrier. And to me, it's, companies like Beyond or Miyoko's or others are trying to play the same game that Tesla seems to have been very effective at. The future is not that everyone owns a Tesla. The future is that people begin by saying, I can imagine a future without internal combustion engines. If we can say we can imagine a future that's richer in vegetables, richer in biodiversity, that's richer in agriculture, we've already made tremendous progress from where we were 5 years ago. So, yeah.
So there is some hope in this dynamic development that we see out there. And
yeah, but I think the other wonderful confounding dynamic is that the more stones you turn over, the more you realize you have a lot more work to do. So we start saying like, oh, great. So now we have more people looking for, let's say, plant-based foods. That's great. But we now also need to pay attention to what does it really take to do plant-based foods in the right way. Is it a boost for the conventional system, and that has its impact issues, or can we do it better? And so trying not to miss opportunities as they present themselves during this sort of phase change is, I'm hopeful, but it's a lot of work.
Oh, that's cool. So if I give you a picture, and then you'll so this curve of food slumping down in quality and the way we produce it, etc. Have we reached the bottom yet, and we are on the way up, or are we still going down?
So that could be. Do you mean in terms of nutrient content in food?
I guess it's kind of a complex question.
It is, because if you're talking about things like ecosystem impacts, we're still sliding a long way. I mean, looking at the various tipping points when it comes to the carrying capacity of our ecosystem, where do you start? Is it topsoil loss in the basins of the U.S.? Is it desertification increases in around the world? Is it lack of biodiversity and biodiversity crash? Is it the depletion of our oceans? That list is depressing as hell. If you look at the more we understand about the functionality of food and nutrient content, it's pretty bad. That's an easier one to address, but there's some real infrastructural and design challenges when it comes to nutrient recycling, based on, as I know you're talking about with this whole talk, the fact that we're growing ever more in cities, and therefore we're concentrating ever more in a one-way fashion all the nutrients and resources that we're taking from a thoroughly depleted sort of agricultural basin. And the creative challenge and tension, I think, there is trying to figure out how to, have a nice feedback loop. So have we hit rock bottom? No, but I think we are also seeing some fantastic abilities of people to reimagine solutions and to quickly expand them to show the power of scaling to address them.
Lovely, which is a perfect segue, of course, into the next segment, which is